Bonjour, hi. Welcome back to another episode of Matthew's Always Wrong. And today is White Boy Summer officially. So, we are outside here. We have a great show. I know I've been a little late with the little episodes, but was busy. We were working on some stuff. Very excited for. But today there was a lot of news that has gone on for the past week or so that I was gone. Most importantly, it is now Pride Month. Congratulations to the gay people. You now have a month while soldiers get a day. And that's how it should be in this country, you know? Gay people have to go through a lot more hardship than soldiers do. It's just a fact. Don't hate me. But, as the start of Pride Month is here, I think it's important to talk about a few of the people who have really pushed the movement forward. And a few of those people who have really pushed the movement forward have been, as you know, a very strong ally of the cause of the movement, and that being Donald J. Trump. Trump is an absolutely devoted activist to the cause, and he truly cares about trans rights, so much so that he is being indicted on 34 counts of felony charges because of his support of the gays. And you might go, well, I don't think the case was about gay people. This is what they don't want you to know, okay? This trumped up charges that they brought up against Donald Trump is actually because he's such a supporter, and the institutions and the establishment, they don't want to see him succeed. You know? They don't want to see him flourish. He's had to go so long hiding his true identity. And I just got this information today, and that's why it took so long, because I was gathering all this information. Donald Trump is actually two-spirited and trans. You thought Dylan Mulvaney looked like a woman? Well, now, okay, Trump is actually a woman. And this whole thing with Stormy Daniels is actually because Stormy Daniels was an ex-lover. They were both lesbian together, and they were ex-lovers. And then they got into an argument, and then she had to pay Stormy Daniels off, and that's just a fact of what happened. Just lost my paper. There's a lot of wind. See, even the wind doesn't want people to know this. But no, actually, let's talk about this case, because this case, for those of you who don't know, Donald Trump a few days ago got convicted on 34 felony counts of who knows what. These charges have been trumped up, pun intended, but it's just the weaponization of the judicial system against a former president and a running candidate for the presidency. He will be sentenced on July 11th, 4 days before the Republican National Convention, and they're hoping that this will hurt support, because that's the whole point of this, is that in the mind of the Democrats and the establishment and Joe Biden, they think that if Donald Trump is convicted of crimes and is put behind bars, that it'll hurt his chances for winning the election. When in reality, what we're now seeing is that he was wrong. Just after being convicted, one poll came out saying that Trump went up 6% in the polls, because people are noticing that this is odd. Presidents aren't usually charged. In fact, he is the first former president to be charged on any crime. Isn't that interesting? Generally, what happens is that in order to be charged with a crime as a former president, or even as a sitting president, you have to first be impeached, and then you'd be able to be convicted of crimes. Not only did Trump beat the impeachment charges twice, which they threw at him for stuff that Joe Biden is doing already and isn't being impeached. They're getting him on the crime. So what is the crime, right? Because they're getting him on these weird crimes that, first of all, giving hush money payments is not illegal. And that's not what they're getting him on. The whole thing is called, all the case is called, it's just hush money payments. Well, no, it's not. It's the classification of the hush money payments that were not properly classified, and that's what they're convicting him on. And traditionally, this charge would be barely a misdemeanor. It would be barely a misdemeanor crime. And it's something that's just a clerical error. They're saying that. So, here are the key facts from Forbes before I can go. My God. Here are the key facts from Forbes, and then I'll get into who's politically motivated behind all of these charges. So, Trump's indictment stems from the $130,000 payment which Trump's ex-attorney Michael Cohen made to Daniels in October 2016 to cover up the allegations of having an affair with Trump in 2006. That's when Trump was that was pre-transition Trump. That was before he was a man. Trump then allegedly reimbursed Cohen $420,000, consisting of the Daniels payments, a separate expense, a $60,000 bonus, and enough to cover the taxes on the payment, which were made through the Trump Organization. Though many came out of the Trump personal bank account and were allegedly falsely labeled as being for legal services through a retainer agreement. So this entire case is based off the fact that it wasn't or was a legal payment. That's basically all it is, which he's paying his lawyer to pay off something. $130,000 Trump and Cohen paid to silence Daniels is not actually illegal in itself. Hush money agreements that both parties enter into consensually are totally legal. Hush money payments can be illegal if they're done to cover up a crime. So that's where the felony comes in. If it would just have been a clerical error, where it was just a miscategorization of the funds, which would have just been a misdemeanor, in order for these charges to become a felony, it has to be covering up a separate crime. Now, what separate crime is it covering up? In Trump's case, he's not being charged with making the payment itself or reimbursing it, but has only been indicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records based on the fact that reimbursement payments to Cohens were allegedly disguised as legal payments. So because he classified them as legal payments, it's now 34 counts of felony charges. Even if hush money isn't inherently illegal, some prosecutors have argued that the way Daniels was paid through Cohen right before the 2016 election was a campaign finance crime. Even though it came out of the Trump bank account and, he paid for it. All right. The alleged crime that Trump's been charged with, falsification of business record, is typically classified as a misdemeanor under New York law, but is elevated to a felony when it's done to facilitate another crime. That's what the prosecutors are alleging here. All 34 counts against Trump are classified as felony. With Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Braggs, which we'll talk about in a second, arguing that allegedly falsely labeled payments were done to cover up other crimes, including Cohen's campaign finance crimes and alleged tax issues, as payments to Cohen were falsely classified as income rather than repayment. And then Trump is saying this is all a witch hunt. So, why is this happening to Trump? Well, the liberal establishment, the Democrats, through a district attorney and a judge. So you've got Judge Juan Merkin, who was born in Colombia and moved to New York when he was 6. And then you also have Manhattan DA Alvin Braggs. These guys are getting paid by liberal Jewish mega donor George Soros, who we've talked about before in terms of inciting the Palestine protests at all the colleges and funding a bunch of left-wing policy decisions. This guy has been instrumental in the left-wing and the Democrat platform because he's donated hundreds of millions of dollars to their causes. And guess what? He's directly funding the district attorney, Alvin Braggs, who's in charge of convicting Trump, along with Judge Juan Merkin. Alvin Braggs got money from George Soros, $1 million for Color of Change Super PAC. So Color of Change Super PAC is it's a political action committee that's used to help further certain policy platforms. A lot of that money ended up going to Alvin Bragg's re-election campaign. Then Soros, his son, and his wife directly contributed to his campaign. So what you're seeing here is that someone who's deeply embedded and indebted and owes his success to the Soros family and George Soros himself through the Super PAC. And if that doesn't seem like a conflict of interest, that's because it is. It is a conflict of interest. How are you allowed? And because that's how it works in the American political system. No president or any politician is actually doing anything for the kindness of their own heart. In fact, they're just being paid off by these billionaires and these super PACs in order to push different policy agendas that they like. And in this case, it is these massively left-wing policy agendas, which seems to... George Soros seems to like to ensue division and ensue catastrophism. This happened in 2020 when you looked at a lot of the BLM funding, and where did that come from? Interesting. George Soros has also given hundreds of millions of dollars to the Biden campaign and other subsidiaries like the Stop Republicans Super PAC. So, you're looking at all these things where you've got a judge and you've got a district attorney that are being directly funded by these Democrat mega donors. And then they asked Biden, which was absolutely wild. They actually asked Biden, they go, what do you think about Donald Trump being imprisoned? And he looks back, this dementia old man just looks back and just starts grinning. It's really off-putting. I don't understand. This guy's not cogent whatsoever, but, why does the president of the most powerful country in the world need to be cogent? Doesn't really matter. He's not even running things, so who cares, right? So, yeah. Now, why did this happen, and why is this affecting Trump in a way that they didn't think was going to happen? Because here's the truth. Coming out of 2020 and the 2020 election, Trump wasn't popular. He wasn't that popular. He failed on a lot of the key issues that he had promised voters in 2016. He failed on the border. In fact, illegal migration was massively up in that time. Throughout his presidency, illegal migrations at the southern Mexican-U.S. border were massively up. They've been the highest they've been in 20 years. He wasn't able to build the wall. All the left-wing media were absolutely dunking on him. CNBC, MSNBC were just absolutely destroying him in the media because that's all they did, and that's how they get a lot of their, that's how they get a lot of their money, a lot of the clicks. The Trump effect was real. After Trump left, CNN's viewership absolutely tanked. So they kind of needed him, right? So he's a lot less popular. A lot of people didn't like how he handled COVID. And Trump was a lot less popular. He didn't have the same spark that he had in 2016. So they elected Joe Biden, which there was a lot of election interference, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So Trump's a lot less popular. He's been, he was extremely polarizing because he was on Twitter and he was saying all these things. And people didn't like the stuff that he was saying, even though the rhetoric was a lot more intense than the actual policy. He would say a lot of things, but then he would never actually do them. So going into 2020, he lost a lot of his momentum. That's just a fact, and that's why Joe Biden gets elected. But then Joe Biden gets elected, just prints money, and now you're in a position right now where Joe Biden's even less popular than Trump was. And then that in itself would make it neck and neck, because if it was literally any other politician on the Republican side, they would have no problem demolishing Joe Biden because he's such a hated person. But the fact is that Trump is hated even more, that he's hated so much that, you have a lot of these independents and you had these third-party voters and a lot of these moderate Democrats who maybe wouldn't have voted for Joe Biden because they don't like him, but then they see the other option, Donald Trump, and it just enrages them so much that it just activates the Democrat base to go vote for Joe Biden. So literally any other Republican candidate would have a lot easier time beating out Joe Biden than Trump was. If you look at the polls, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's not a Republican, he's a Democrat, I get it, and running as an independent, absolutely destroys both Joe Biden and Trump in a one-on-one presidential candidate situation. But, people got really fed up of Joe Biden. They're seeing a lot of his mismanagement. They're seeing an absolutely horrendous foreign policy. They're seeing an economy with high inflation and stagnant growth. They're seeing an immigration crisis that was not seen under Trump and is orders of magnitudes higher than it's ever been. Millions of people were flooding the southern border. It was just open. Then you have a lot of these DEI policies and these Democrat judges just letting out violent criminals on no bail policies. And just people became really fed up with this old man who doesn't seem to be knowing anything. And they're looking at, why was the biggest wealth transfer in history from the bottom and middle class to the upper class under your presidency, and why is it so much harder now to get a job? Why can't I afford a home? And all these other things. So people are looking at this and they're going, maybe Biden isn't that good, but I still don't like Trump. He's so divisive, right? And then they're looking at the polls and they're going, well, now he's gaining, especially with the black and the Hispanic voters, because they're seeing, especially in those communities, they're seeing, all these migrants are coming in, they're sucking up resources, and we're already impoverished, but you're letting all the migrants suck up all the resources, and they're not liking that. So you see Trump creeping up in the polls. It's still not that big of a margin of error, but the Democrat Party is seeing this, and what they're hoping for is that instead of beating him through policy, because they have no policy platform, they have nothing, instead of beating him through traditional means, they think if we imprison him, that'll make people so disgusted with voting for a convicted felon that it'll be impossible for us to lose, right? You thought wrong. People are seeing this, these cases thrown against Trump as political persecution. They're seeing it as Biden is trying to arrest his political opponent, and people don't like that. They don't like it because they see what happens in Russia. They saw what happened in China. They know what happened in Nazi Germany. So these people are looking at all these things and they're going, I was maybe not going to vote for Biden, but now I'm definitely voting for Trump because this guy's trying to be a dictator. And not a good one at that. If Joe Biden was a good dictator, people would vote for him. Don't you get it? This is why we need good dictators back. But no, people look at this and they're saying this does not seem fair. It doesn't seem, and a lot of people, they understand. They're like, what is he being convicted of? Misclassifying documents? Oh, but Joe Biden did that. Oh, but Obama drone striked a bunch of U.S. citizens. Oh, President Clinton was the number one guy at the Epstein Island. Will those guys get convicted? No. And it's setting up a horrendous precedent, where if you can be convicted of a crime as a sitting president, not only will nobody want to become president anymore, it makes you an ineffective leader, because you need to have at least some sort of presidential immunity, and that's what likely the Supreme Court's going to say about the presidential immunity case. They're going to probably say that the president does have certain immunities, because otherwise a lot of former presidents would be able to be convicted of war crimes and a bunch of other things that maybe aren't so savory. And they're saying, and they're probably going to say, the Supreme Court's probably going to say, well, the president has to have some sort of immunity in order to do his job properly, or else he would not be able to function. Does he have full immunity? No. If you were the president and you just shot someone on camera, you would probably go to prison. But there has to be some level of immunity when doing your day-to-day job. And if Trump can be convicted and this doesn't get appealed, which it probably will get appealed, this will set a horrendous precedent where other future presidents might be able to also get prosecuted on these very tiny, insignificant crimes that aren't even crimes and that would generally just be considered a clerical error. And now, after this conviction came out, Trump had one of the biggest, funding raises for him to date, and it's not by super donors, it's not by these billionaires like George Soros funding him. No, it's a massive grassroots movement in order to give him. So 24 hours after the conviction happens, he raises $38 million. And so far, it's almost been a week, he's raised over $200 million. And that just goes to show, plus the 6-point boost in the polls, that just goes to show that the American public does not like that a political opponent is being arrested. They don't like it. And now I want to go a little bit more into how he got, how this charge came to be, how this guilty verdict came. The jury was told by Judge Juan Merchan that they did not need to be unanimous in their vote. And what does that mean? In order for him to be convicted of the felony, they needed a unanimous vote, right? But what he told the jury was that because there were several different crimes, there were four different crimes, you could say that if you said he was guilty of one crime, but not all three, you could just say that he was fully guilty. So what does that mean? It means that you could have had there's a jury of 12 people. You could have had 4 saying he did one crime, 4 saying he did another crime, and 4 saying he did another crime. 3 separate crimes, but that would be considered unanimous. So you're looking at this and it's like, well, already on top of the fact that it seems like a massive political persecution, now you're just manipulating the jurors and you're manipulating the public into thinking that, this is a unanimous vote. When in reality, maybe not everyone agreed on everything. Maybe certain people were like, well, I don't think the second charges, the second and third charges are real, but maybe he did the first one. Let me vote for the first one, and it's unanimous. He's in prison, So, if Trump goes to prison, which I don't think he will, they will probably give him on July 11th when they sentence him, he will probably just get probation or a house arrest type deal. If they truly put him in prison and he runs his campaign from prison, that will be the craziest sight in history, and he will probably win. Already he's probably going to win, despite all the cheating that the Democrats are going to try and throw at him. You cannot, in this day and age, you cannot throw political opponents in prison. Because just the picture of seeing Trump in an orange jumpsuit will radicalize a massive portion of a lot of moderate Democrats and will really activate the Republican base, who maybe not everyone agreed with Trump. And I don't even agree with Trump. I don't agree on everything with Trump. I didn't think he was that good as a president. But compared to the alternative, he seems to be the only option. And what will happen is if they see him in prison, it will definitely activate people. It'll activate people as much as, maybe you had some Republicans that were kind of, wishy-washy on him. They'll see him in prison. They go, you know what? Fuck this. I'm voting for this guy. Anyways, this will come, the sentence will come a few weeks after the actual debate, and I'm very excited to see the debate, and I think we'll have to do a live stream on the debate to see, who's going to win, which, by the way, I don't know what drugs they're going to have to give Joe Biden in order to get him to fight against Trump. This debate will be an absolute bloodbath if they don't get him on the new Pfizer cocaine or Pfizer fentanyl, But we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see what happens. But right now, it's completely backfired for the Democrats. And I think what they're hoping for is kind of a false flag type scenario, black swan type scenario, where, you're going to see a bunch of stuff in the news where right-wing and nationalists and neo-Nazis and, MAGA supporters, they're taking arms and they're trying to overthrow the government. They're going to probably try and paint another January 6th type situation where they blame the right and the MAGA, the MAGA supporters and just the right wing in general. And they're going to try and blame them for probably throwing an uprising or some mass shooting or something like that. That's what the media is going to concoct in order to vilify this entire group of people and continually, divide the country. And that's just what, they're going to probably do. You already hear some of the programming, the pre-programming by the media, where they're talking about how there's just like right-wing training camps in certain places in America where they're training in order to begin an uprising against the government. So, this is why Alex Jones is saying that we don't need violence. True, nobody take your arms and start attacking him. Anyways, that's just the Trump thing. That's, that's probably the biggest backfire that they could have done. But we'll have to wait and see, and I'm very excited to see the debate, as I think many people are, even though it's already super Joe Biden leaning. There won't be an audience. It'll be televised. The moderator is going to be some leftist. The mics will cut off immediately. So we'll have to see. My next story is back to Canadian news. And I really wanted to talk about the financial irresponsibility of the government as usual. As usual, the government is horrendous at spending. And I think they just love pissing down taxpayer money down the drain. I think they truly love it. This is what they like to do. They like to just throw all our taxpayer money down the drain. And what am I talking about? First, I want to talk about the consultation costs. And this is and what got me into the story was this one headline where Ottawa spent $670,000 on consultation costs to KPMG, which is one of the largest consulting firms, to find ways to lower consultation costs. $670,000 in consultations in order to figure out how should we lower consultation costs. And that's what got me into this, and I think it's pretty funny. But this just came in that Justin Trudeau's environment minister has spent upwards of $576 million on consultation costs since elected. And you know what that's brought? The environment minister, by the way. You know what that's brought on? Canada's emissions are up since 2022. And we've dropped 4 places in the ranking to 62nd out of 67 in terms of our climate emissions. So I think we're really hitting the goal, and I think why not spend another $500,000? Let's get that number up to $1 billion, because you throw more money at it, it'll fix the issue. We'll lower our emissions. And I love how there's absolutely no oversight over this, that these people can just spend $500 million on ways to, consult in order to lower emissions, or how to lower consultation costs, and yet nothing really works. It kind of seems like it's a scam. It kind of seems like these people are just extracting money from the government, and the government has no oversight about what's going on. Kind of seems like it, doesn't it? And then it comes out that the companies behind ArriveCan, which I've spoke about before, but I'll just reiterate, because this was just some mystical app that the government was pushing. But what it's for is for customs and immigration declarations in order to save time. So instead of going to the custom people and talking to them and filling out all these forms, you do it on the app and it's quicker. All right, that's the premise. This app was supposed to cost $80,000 originally. All right, pretty cheap for the government. $80,000 to make an app so that you can go through customs quicker. And it was also used for COVID and a bunch of other things. The total cost now has ballooned to $54 to $60 million, but it is, quote, impossible to determine the real cost because of a lack of accounting and a lack of accountability in terms of where these costs come from and where they've gone. Isn't that funny? How did it cost $60 million for something that was supposed to cost $80,000? Well, they contracted the construction of the app. So the government didn't even make the app. They just took this money and gave it to this company, GC Strategies, who then took that money. And by the way, GC Strategies has 2 employees. It has 2 employees. They took that money from the government and they just outsourced it to they subcontracted it to like 10 other firms. So why are they giving money to GC Strategies when the government could have just, subcontracted it, or they could have just made them themselves? So yeah, that money is gone. And then it comes out how many people are actually using ArriveCan, because you could maybe justify the $60 million cost if everyone's using it and this is an extremely vital thing in terms of customs and clearance. In 2023, when it was made optional, only 1/10 of the people entering Canada used it, and it's only available at 10 different airports around Canada. The government spent $60 million on something that 1/10 of people coming in through 10 airports in Canada are using. Something that is originally supposed to cost $80,000 now is ballooned to over $60 million, and that's just what we know. We don't even know how much in total it's cost. And what keeps getting worse, right, is that 3 companies behind ArriveCan, so this GC Strategies and 2 other companies called Dalian Enterprises and Garadix Tech Consulting, have gotten billions in federal contracts. For what? And for much little oversight. So Garadix Tech and GC Enterprises each have 2 employees. These guys have gotten billions of dollars in funding. Then you have Dalian Enterprises, which has 40 employees. All right, so let's look at how much this has cost, right? How much money have these people gotten? They've gotten $500 million, $200 million. GC Strategies have gotten over $200 million from the government for a company with 2 employees and who's subcontracting out all the work. I really love how there's so much, federal oversight when looking at this. So it just goes to show that more and more of our government not only is not doing anything and just outsourcing all of its work, it just shows that they don't care about how they spend the taxpayer dollars. They want to talk about how everything needs to be fair. They want to talk about how, you need to pay more taxes. You need to pay the carbon tax. You need to pay all these other taxes. And this is what they spend the money. And, they don't seem to understand that this is making people angry. This is radicalizing people. Let's keep going. Total liberal outsourcing costs were $14.6 billion, up 24%. The top 10 firms that outsource their money: the Canada Revenue Agency, Border Security and Immigration. The top 10 account for 78% of all outsourcing. So the Canadian government is outsourcing work for tax collection, border security, and immigration. Do those things not seem like something that the federal government should be able to do on its own without needing to subcontract that out? Why are we subcontracting 30% of the Canadian Revenue Agency, which is just like the American IRS and much less efficient? Why is 30% of that being outsourced to private companies? So you're telling me that private companies are now in charge of collecting taxes in Canada? They're now in charge of operating the border and immigration control? That seems curious. It seems maybe not so democratically elected, that you have these companies who are run by people nobody knows, who have no oversight, and who are hidden away from public view. And these people are getting billions of dollars from the federal government to do jobs that the federal government should be doing on its own, and collects taxes under the guise that they'll be doing this work for the people. So fun. I love it. I love it so much. And the fact that the top 10 firms in Canada, which include a bunch of other things like the military and the RCMP, account for 78% of total outsourcing. And by the way, outsourcing costs were up 24% to $14.6 billion. So, you think you're struggling. I think the federal government's struggling even more. Who gets hit more by inflation? The government, who can print money, or you? It's the government, by the way. The government, this is why I think the government needs to increase taxes. Because people, they have it too good. And I think people, they don't appreciate the government enough. Me personally, I appreciate the government just like how I appreciate Boeing. And I think that, they have a hard job sitting up there in their parliament palaces. And, they have to come up with these bright ideas in order to, make the country work. They have to come up with, what firm should we outsource this job to? And then they have to do it. And then, the companies, they're asking for more money. So what's the government going to have to do? They have to spend more money because they have no choice. But no, this is absolutely outrageous that they've spent so much money, on these useless things. Why can't the federal government be in charge of collecting taxes? Does that not make sense? That's outrageous. And the final story of today is it's a little fun one. It's a little fun story. This just came out as Trump was being convicted. And it goes like this. Biden now allows Ukraine to begin bombing Russian cities with U.S. taxpayer-funded and American-made weapons. Fun. I love how a small country, through a proxy war with America and Russia, will now be allowed to attack territories within Russia using weapons made from America and funded by American taxpayer dollars. So let's aggravate the biggest nuclear superpower on the planet by allowing Ukraine to win the war and invade Russian territories. which, by the way, anybody who thinks that Ukraine could have possibly won or will win the war is wrong. The U.S. has sent over $300 billion. Canada has sent tens of billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. And what has happened? Well, they've lost 15% of their territory, and that's not moving. Russia's been holding the 2 regions that they've wanted to hold forever now, and they're just slowly advancing more and more. And the American appetite for sending more foreign aid has been dwindling, and Canadian foreign aid has also been dwindling, even though Pierre Poilievre seems to want to fast track more Ukraine aid, which I love, by the way, because I'm a big Ukraine supporter. But this news is truly horrendous for anybody who thinks that this will lead to an escalation in the war and then possibly bring upon the possibility of a third world war, because you already have NATO troops from France in the Ukraine fighting right now, and you have a bunch of other countries which are thinking about, Germany is thinking about introducing a draft in order to bring more troops to Ukraine. And you think these things and you're like, well, why did Russia do this war? It's because they saw that NATO was actively pushing to get Ukraine into NATO, which they essentially promised Russia they wouldn't do. And this whole war could have been avoided if NATO said, we don't want Ukraine into NATO. That's all they had to do. And now hundreds of billions of dollars have been wasted. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men and a large portion, tens of thousands of Russian men have been killed. Cities have been destroyed. There's been economic destruction. There's been mass killing. All because NATO and their Western allies, America and the European Union, wanted to push and get Ukraine into it because they saw Russia as this big bad guy. Putin is the worst. Say, all right. So now we're going to escalate that a little bit. Let's keep poking the bear with nuclear bombs. President Biden, major shift pressed by his advisors and key allies, has authorized Ukraine to conduct limited strikes, inside Russia with American-made weapons, opening what could well be a new chapter in the war for Ukraine, U.S. officials said on Thursday. Mr. Biden's decision appears to mark the first time that an American president has allowed limited military response on artillery, missile bases, and command centers inside the border of a nuclear-armed adversary. White House officials insisted, however, that the authorization extended only to what they could characterize as acts of self-defense, so that Ukraine could protect Kharkiv, the second largest city, and the surrounding areas from missile, glide bombs, and artillery shells from just over the border. Yes, self-defense by proactively attacking territory within Russia. Seems like, seems chill. Seems chill. And by the way, they did this completely by secret. They were supposed to have a press conference, but then when Trump got, indicted, everyone was like, let's forget about it. Biden, you don't need to do the press conference. This is all done by secret. This White House cast a decision as a narrow one, allowing Ukraine to strike preemptively if they see evidence for preparation for an attack, which is not self-defense, but okay, or in response to a Russian barrage near Kharkiv. The implications are much broader. Until now, Mr. Biden has flatly refused to let Ukraine use American-made weapons outside of Ukrainian border, no matter what provocation, saying that any attack on the Russian territory risks violating his mandate to avoid World War III. Yeah. But having reversed this position, even in limited circumstances, Mr. Biden has clearly crossed the red line that he himself drew, and administration officials conceded that if Russia mounted other attacks from inside its territory beyond Kharkiv, the president's restriction could be subject to further loosening. Do you understand? Do you get it now? They want an escalation. Because here's why. If there's an increase in escalation, who wins? Who wins? I'll tell you who wins. Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Raytheon. They make a lot more money when there's a bigger war going on and more people need their bombs, need their jets, need their artillery, need their tanks. You know? These military defense contractors, they want more war. That's what they want. The bankers want more because they can loan money out to the government. Everybody is pushing towards war because it makes them more money. They don't care about you. They don't care. And you know, if Ukraine gets accepted into NATO, you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? Canada will have to get involved, because if Ukraine joins NATO right now, that means that Russia is fighting a war against NATO, and therefore Canada, America, and most of the European Union will have to get involved. They'll have to send troops, they'll have to put boots on the ground and fund a much bigger escalation of war with a massive nuclear power. That's just a fact. All they have to do to end this war, and by the way, there have been tens of peace negotiations that Russia's wanted, saying just give us these regions, just promise us that NATO won't encroach on Ukraine, and we'll leave this alone, we'll end it. And you know what the American and the British and the German and the French officials have said? Nope. You don't get to do that. Alright? We're gonna keep fighting because Ukraine can win. Which they can't. They can't. Russia's population's too big. Their industrial might is too big. Ukraine doesn't have the population anymore. They've consistently lowered the conscription age because they're having a massive conscription crisis because all their troops are going out there and they're getting drone bombed. They've got these drones now that they're just controlling, go up near a soldier and they just explode and they kill people. They're even enlisting people with Down syndrome into the army. At least they're inclusive, you know? But it's absolutely a horrendous situation that has been completely unwinnable for Ukraine. It's very simple. It's always been unwinnable. There's no situation. And then you have all these sanctions against Russia, which has taken out all of the big American businesses out of Russia, like McDonald's, like your Coca-Cola, all these companies which feed basically poison to all the population. Oh no, now Russia can't have their sugar water and their GMO hamburger from McDonald's? No, what are they going to do? Oh, they banned GMOs. Oh, now their population are, a lot healthier, it seems. Then, you look at these sanctions. So now they can't trade with Europe. So who are they selling their natural gas and their oil to? Oh, China and India. Oh, they're cozying up with those powers. Oh, they're cozying up with BRICS. They're cozying up with the Middle East. Huh, interesting. Oh, Western dominance is declining now because of all these sanctions completely failing. The Russian economy is doing quite well because of a wartime economy, and the Russian ruble is doing quite well also, boosted by high oil prices, which Russia's a massive oil producer. So you're looking at all these things, and you know who's going to come out on top? It won't be Ukraine. It will be Russia. And it'll be the big businesses who are funding all of this, whose military weapons are being used, who ammunition's being bought. And that's just how it goes. So I'm not on either side. People go, well, you support Putin. No, it's just a logical response against Western aggression through encroaching on NATO. It's just a fact. That's all it is. Imagine if China, as part of a military alliance, started putting bombs in Mexico. Imagine if Russia started putting bombs in Greenland. What do you think the response by the Canadian officials and the American officials would be? That would not be allowed. But when America puts bombs in the Ukraine, we just have to assume that Russia's going to accept that? No, because that's not what they're going to do. That's just how it works. People are, they seem to be completely ignorant to this fact that there's these powerful forces that are kind of pushing, you're just edging on all these groups in order to further a certain type of agenda, an agenda that's full of war. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening. And again, maybe I could be wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. That's just a fact. Anyways, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.